A whole new world. The street rats. The carpet flew down an empty street. Aladdin stood tall and barely needed to move his arms to balance, even when they took corners fast. Once again he wished he had time to really see what it could do, but more pressing things awaited in the corner of the street rats. If the section of it that Jasmine had seen was frightening, well, Aladdin pressed on through the neighborhoods that were downright dangerous. Tall old buildings toppled each other over and blocked out the sky overhead. At midday the streets were in shadow, which was a relief from the sun but felt everything in a strange hot twilight. There were a lot of places to hide. Black windows on vacant houses looked like empty eye sockets. Grim, broken statuary and crumbling piles of bricks made it seem like an ancient war zone. The only open space was one of the few graveyards inside the city walls. Its creepy, spiky stones stood like snaggle teeth pointing in all directions. The whole place was flooded with loneliness and desperation, and yet at the same time there was a constant feeling of being watched by someone, or something, unseen. The only people visible had shifty eyes and a palpable sense of roguery about them. Aladdin jumped off the carpet in front of an abandoned building that looked like all the others. Growing used to their routine, the carpet helpfully rolled itself up and slung itself over his shoulder. It had been quite literally years since Aladdin had set foot in this place, and he carefully stepped over the dusty threshold. He saw that it was all almost exactly as he remembered it, although the windowless rooms should have been nearly pitch black. Strangely convenient cracks in the walls and loose stones illuminated necessary things. A doorway here and a stairway there, and a deadly booby trap there, which Aladdin remembered at the last moment, pulling his foot back just before stepping onto the stone that would snap around him and fling him aloft, trussing him up like a rabbit. With a shuddering release of breath, Aladdin proceeded more carefully through the building in the back room. Counting by threes, he found the right board to lift up and revealed an old storage cellar. Once down there, he tiptoed around what looked like a nest of scorpions and slipped behind some old broken clay ephrae. Finally, he jumped into a black, slanting tunnel, landing on a slippery metal slide that he surfed down with ease. Receiving him at the bottom was a cave, which, while he remembered it fondly, now sensed a little too similar to the Cave of Wonders. He tried not to panic, swallowing several times and trying desperately to notice the differences. This one was smaller, and not full of wonders at all, but dozens of flickering oil lamps and pairs of glittering eyes. "Nice place you have here," Aladdin drawled, trying not to let his voice crack. "Love what you haven't done with it." "Aladdin?" Morgiana's tiny, tightly muscled, and very familiar form resolved itself from the shadows. She was dressed differently from the last time Aladdin had seen her. A pair of black harem pants was belted tightly across her belly, so they moved with the slightest bump of her hips. She used to wear a close-fitting top that exposed her midriff and arms, but now had a loose black shirt made of the same material that tied up her mass of impenetrable black curls. Her normally aristocratically hooked nose was squinched like she smelled something bad, and her ample lips were pursed. The dimple on her cheek that used to show when she smiled was nowhere to be found. "I don't remember asking you over to dinner," she said. "I was in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd drop by," he quipped. "What's cooking?" "Aladdin!" Dubon came forward with a much more genuine smile. It faded after a moment, as if only just then remembering something about his old friend. The thief looked exactly the same as he always did, if a little taller, square, thickest, with surprisingly intelligent eyes and an otherwise wide and open face. His long black hair was pulled back into a ponytail and held with golden rings. Golden rings were on his ears now, too. "Come, sit down, break some bread with us." Aladdin looked at the additional sets of eyes watching from the darkness. Morgiana and Dubon he had known forever. He couldn't say that about anyone else. Their little gang of thieves had grown over the years. If for some reason anything got ugly, it would be hard to escape. But he was already this far in. "Absolutely," he said, with forced jollity, and yet even the fake smile slipped from his face as he approached the pile of pillows and rugs. Save for a moment, exhaustion almost overwhelmed him. He hadn't eaten much, and the events of the past several days were taking their toll. Morgiana's expression softened. "Are you all right?" "I'll be fine," he said, waving a hand at her. He collapsed as gracefully as he could on a low table and tried to reach for some grapes as slowly and nonchalantly as possible. "We'll get you some water," Morgiana decided. She made a clicking noise and raised her chin at one of the much younger thieves in the dark. Another cup for our guest. Hazan, go. The little boy leapt up quick as the shadow to fulfill her request. What's been going on with you? Dubon asked, sitting down next to him. You look like you've been in combat. Oh, it's nothing. Just in trouble as usual, Aladdin said. When the boy reappeared with his drink, he sipped it slowly as if it was no big deal. Then he threw 5 grapes into the air and caught them in his mouth, swallowing without chewing. I think the bigger question is, what has happened to Agrabah in the last few days since I've been otherwise occupied? Dubon laughed. Wouldn't we all like to know? It seems as if creepy Grand Vizier Jafar is now creepy Sultan Jafar. I noticed that, Aladdin said, nodding. It's actually been surprisingly okay, Morgiana admitted. The regime change, I mean. Not too much violence, no military uprising, and life under the new Sultan has been so far pretty good. No one in the city has gone hungry since he took over. Everyone in the quarter of the street rats has had full bellies, for the first time in their lives, some of them. No one has had to steal food because of all the handouts. Which makes our livelihood a little unstable, Dupin said with a wry smile. Especially with Jafar's announcement about new peacekeeping patrols that will walk the city now. Crime is already down. But other than us, everyone's been pretty happy, Morgiana added cheerfully. No one cares that Jafar killed old Whitebeard in cold blood. Aladdin choked on a grape. Killed? Yes, Dubon said with a philosophical shrug. Despite the largesse, Jafar isn't exactly an angel. He called everyone in the city to gather in front of the public balcony and announced that he was the new Sultan, and then he threw the old Sultan over the railing, just like that. After he made it rain gold, Morgiana pointed out, with a familiar flick of her fingers, and a small coin appeared in her hand. It glittered ominously in the lamplight. Aladdin noticed piles of more of some coins behind her, like tiny versions of the mountains of gold treasures in the Cave of Wonders. He frowned and took the coin from her. She didn't object, unlike the old Morgiana who would have yelped and grabbed it back. She merely watched him as he carefully held it between his thumb and forefinger, tilting it in the light to get a better look. It felt like real pure gold, heavier than its tiny size would seem to have justified, blank on one side. On the other was a strange jagged symbol. He couldn't figure out, ancient and threatening looking, almost like a stylized lizard or a parrot, Morgiana filled in. We think. A very angry one by the look of it. See? His beak opened here, and there, his claws there. You sort of have to use your imagination. Oh, I see it now. Jafar has a pet one, right? Morgiana nodded. He gave the coin back to her. It didn't look much like a parrot, really. It looked evil. And they just stay? They don't disappear after a while like the treasure of an Ifrit or in old stories? Morgiana shrugged. Nope, they stick around. It's all real. Aladdin didn't like it. He couldn't get his mind off the mountains of ancient gold buried in the desert. What about Princess Jasmine? He asked finally. Jafar is marrying her, to cement his claim, I assume. And she agreed to this? She wants to marry him? Oh yes, I'm sure she is all into a guy more than twice her age who killed her dad and is generally known to be evil, Morgiana drawled. When did you become such an idiot, Aladdin? But she doesn't love him. No kidding. Kazim, Dubon said with a chuckle. They say his own mother abandoned him at birth. He's so evil. But what choice does she have exactly? Morgiana demanded. She should count herself lucky that he didn't kill her outright along with her dad. It was probably some sort of bargain they made. You marry me and seal my claim to the throne and I won't kill you. Why are you so surprised? It's the first thing you men do when you seize power. Punish all the women. I've got to stop the wedding, Aladdin vowed. Settle down, friend, Dubon said soothingly. But whether it was to Morgiana or Aladdin, it was hard to say. Aladdin, it's not going to be a public ceremony. You can just go and say, I object to this wedding. It's going to be held in the Sultan's private chambers of the palace tomorrow night. Only the highest highborn are invited. That's why there was a parade today, to publicly celebrate it. And, by the way, just why do you have to stop the wedding? Morgiana inquired sleepily. Have you suddenly taken it upon yourself to defend women's rights across the Sultanate, or is there something you're not telling us? Aladdin thought about lying. He was good at it, to other people. These used to be his 2 closest friends. It's a long story, he allowed. Aladdin disappears for a few days, Agrabah is overthrown, and suddenly he has an interest in rescuing a royal princess, Morgiana mused. I'll bet it's a long story. Well, you have until tomorrow night to play the hero, Dubon said, spreading his fingers to show the food, the pillows, and the other younger thieves who were making themselves comfortable in preparation for hearing a good tale. You even brought your own carpet to sit on, he added, looking at the magic carpet doubtfully. What's up with that? Part of the story, Aladdin admitted. Yes, tell us the story. Let's catch up. I haven't seen a boo in ages, Morgiana crooned, taking a grape and handing it to the little monkey. He accepted it from her with a politeness he doesn't usually demonstrate. I don't... But Aladdin was prevented from having to say anything else by the sudden arrival of a swarm of tiny thieves, sliding down the ramp, leaping into the room, rolling and scuttling to present themselves to Morgiana and Dubon. Mistress, the first one said, opening up his hands. In it was a golden bangle and an emerald necklace. Well done, Denny. Excellent. Who's next? All of the thieves lined up to present something to her. Even things as little as an empty leather purse or a single copper coin. I thought you said street rats didn't have to steal food for the last 3 days, Aladdin snapped accusingly at Morgiana. She shrugged. Yes, I said they didn't have to steal food. The parade was a perfect place to remove the valuable possessions of all those idiots hypnotized by the magical buffoonery. This was always my problem with you, Aladdin swore at his old friends. Yes, I steal too, but only what I need, what I can't get for myself. But you do it as your day job. You have a whole life, organization of apprentices here who are going to grow up thinking this is an acceptable thing. If there continues to be food and gold from the palace, it will no longer be an acceptable thing, Morgiana said aggressively. But history has shown time and time again that it is generally unwise to rely on others, especially those in charge, to provide for the poor. I give this new sultan a week or two at most before he realizes he doesn't want to keep giving people handouts, at least not without getting something in return. Even when things are going great, you expect the worst out of people and think you deserve to be stolen from, Aladdin spat. My father didn't deserve to lose the use of his leg, Dubon said mildly. My sister didn't deserve to be beaten by her husband. No one deserves anything they get, Morgiana said, shrugging. It is what it is. You just have to make sure that you at least sometimes are on the good side of getting. For you. And evil keeps going around, Aladdin swore angrily, storming out. There's another way. You don't have to choose this life. You could be something more.